Hey everyone, today we're going to be installing ARK Performance's new lowering springs on my Kia EV6. I'll walk you through the installation process and give you a few tips, and then I'll let you know my thoughts on the springs after driving on them for a couple of months. Now, before we get to the installation, I want to talk about why I got these springs. So I'm a car guy and I love to make my vehicles look as good as possible and push them to the limits when it comes to performance. So for looks, I think the EV6 looks great, especially with the things I've done to mine, like adding the Titan 7 wheels. But the wheel gap between the tires and the fenders always seemed a little much to me. Let's face it, the EV6 is not an SUV, despite what they might claim. It's basically a slightly lifted hatchback, and honestly, I'm not into the slightly lifted look. So I wanted to minimize that wheel gap, but not slam the car and make it too low to where it's annoying to go over speed bumps and I have to worry about dragging or cause issues with dampening with the stock shocks. I've had low cars, I don't want to deal with all that. And these ARK Performance springs seemed like the best middle ground. They lowered about 3/4 of an inch, so they aren't so low that I'll have potential issues like others out there, but they are low enough to reduce that wheel gap and to make it look good. As for performance, I drive my EV6, I push it, I drive it on the racetrack, I take on ramps and off ramps pretty fast. I want to make sure I have solid handling, and the EV6 absolutely handles pretty well, but on the stock springs, of course, there's some body roll. These new springs lower the center of gravity a little bit, and they have a higher spring rate than stock, so body roll is reduced. So for me, it's a win-win, better looks, better handling, little to no negative side effects. Now let's get to the installation. Realistically, if you're comfortable working on cars, this is a pretty easy install and can be done in less than 2 hours for both sides. Sometimes you might have issues getting bolts in or things undone, so with taking breaks, I'd budget maybe 3 to 4 hours. Now, I did the passenger side first to get a feel for everything, and I'll go over basically the entire installation on the driver's side for you so you know what to expect. Don't worry, I'll fast forward through appropriate parts, so this isn't an hour-long video, and I'll show you where you can adjust the rear camber yourself before you get in alignment so you aren't driving around with crazy camber once it's all done. Now for the installation, the first thing we'll do is jack the car up and put it on jack stands, then we'll remove the wheel. I'm going to do the front first. You'll want to have an impact wrench and accompanying sockets. Whether you own one or rent one, it definitely makes it a lot easier. You'll also need a spring compressor too, and again, if you don't have one, you can purchase one or you can rent one from a store like AutoZone. Here you can see the suspension components themselves. We'll go ahead and take this nut off the end of the tie rod here first. This is a 17 millimeter. And I'm going to jack up underneath the control arm to relieve some of the tension so it can come out. There we go. Here you can see a couple of more nuts that will need to come out. I'll let the jack back down here some. We'll go ahead and unhook this brake line. And then we'll remove this here. This is a 12 millimeter. There we go. Now that's loose. Now we can get the other nuts and bolts out. We'll need a 19 millimeter for this. Then I'll go ahead and take loose the 3 nuts under the hood that secure the assembly in place so it can be removed. Don't take off the center nut though. I didn't do this right personally, but you want to leave that in. Then we can take it all out, compress the spring, and then take out that nut. Then once it's loose, we'll take the bolts out on the bottom. and work it out. And then the assembly just comes right out. Now we have the spring and shock assembly here. And this is where you'd want to connect the spring compressor and compress the spring, then use an impact wrench to take out that top center nut, making note of how the spring perch is aligned. It has a mark that makes it easy. I already did that and took off the spring perch. Here's the new spring that will go on. I'll remove the isolator from the old spring. And then take the old spring off. Here you can see it next to the new one. The new one's definitely shorter, but it has a stiffer spring rate, so it won't compress as quickly as the old one. I like the orange look too. We'll go ahead and set the new spring in place. On the bottom, we'll line it up exactly in the same spot as the old one, right up to the notch. Then we'll install the isolator we removed from the old one, which also has a notch as well. Then we'll install the spring perch in the same position it was removed. Let me pull the boot up here. Let me see if I can get this nut on. Nope, I need the spring compressor. On the passenger side I didn't, but I guess I do over here. So I'll connect this on opposite sides of the spring and tighten it down. There we go. And I'll install the nut. And then I'll loosen the spring compressor. And now we have the assembly all together and ready to reinstall in the car. So first I'll go ahead and push it up through the holes under the hood and tighten those nuts down to hold it in place. Then on the bottom here, we'll get everything lined up and reinstall everything in the reverse order of how we removed it. Then we'll reinstall the tire. And then move on to the rear. Here you can see it looks a little bit different, but it's the same concept. We'll start by removing the tie rod. This is a 17 millimeter. Again, I'll jack up some to relieve some pressure. And take it right out. Then I'll let it back down some, but keep it under the control arm to keep tension on the spring so it doesn't release all at once. And we'll take out the bottom bolts. These are 19mm. Sometimes you need to move it around some to get them out. And there we go. And the spring comes right out. I'll go ahead and take off the isolator. And here we can compare the new versus the old spring. Again, the new one is a decent amount shorter, but has a higher spring rate. And now let's go ahead and install the new one, again in the reverse order. So we'll install the isolator. And then we'll slide it up into position. Again, we'll make sure to align the bottom of the spring with a notch in the perch. And then we'll jack up under the control arm and wiggle things around to get them to line up. This might take some finesse. I know a few people have done this and said it took them a long time to align the rear. I found jacking it up pretty good and tapping on it lightly with a hammer helped a lot to get it lined up. I tried with the screwdriver, and then tapping it showed there was a lot of tension with the jack. So I let it back down some, and then it ended up going right in. Not too bad at all. The passenger side was pretty easy too. Now we'll go ahead and finish reinstalling everything. And it looks good. And that orange is going to really stand out. I like that a lot. Now let's put the wheel back on. And we're good to go. I'll give you a quick look underneath. And now let's go ahead and back it out and take a look. Already I can tell there is much less wheel gap than before, which is great. It's going to continue to settle over the next week or two, but not too much. But I like this look a lot. Here you can see a comparison of the wheel gap before and after. And after about a week and a half, I got in alignment and they were able to get everything around normal range and in spec, which is good. No crazy camber. Speaking of camber, you'll notice right after the install that it's very aggressive in the rear once it's dropped, but that is easy to adjust. There's an eccentric bolt under the back that you can loosen the nut and turn the bolt so it pushes the top of the wheel and tire all the way out, and this will drastically improve the camber. But it does also impact the other aspects of the suspension geometry, so make sure you still get a true four-wheel alignment within a week or two of installing the springs. Now, after driving on the new springs for a couple months, I can say I am very happy with them. They're slightly stiffer than stock, so you can feel the bumps a little bit more, but it's not drastic or harsh at all. But in my opinion, it looks so much better than it did before, and it is noticeably flatter in the curves now, which I like. So personally, I think it's a worthwhile investment. Here you can see the wheel gap with my new Atlas tires installed, and I think it looks great. This is the amount of wheel gap that should have come from the factory, in my opinion. And it is nice and even all around. And the price is solid. They have a 15% off sale going on right now, so it's $373. And if you use promo code TechJeff20 by March 31st, you save another $20, bringing it to $353. Shipping looks like it's a flat $40, and there's an optional route package protection that's about $9, bringing the total to right around $400. But yeah, overall, I'm very pleased with the springs. The install wasn't bad at all. They look great. The car has a perfect stance now, in my opinion. It rides great and handles really well. And it's just a great all-around modification for the car, in my opinion. So anyway, let me know what you guys think, and let me know if you have any questions on the springs or the installation. If you liked the video, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.